What if the spell you cast for someone else chose you instead? Ugochi walked into the shrine to secure a husband. She walked out holding a tiny bottle and a big promise. By the next sunrise, the man she loved could no longer stand her voice, and the stranger she feared began to feel like home. Some mistakes don't shout, they whisper, and by the time you hear them clearly, your destiny has already answered.
Hi fam, this is Tales at Dusk, the archive of rich African tales. Tonight's story is about the woman who tried to force destiny and ended up trapping herself instead. Dim the light and listen closely.
Ugochi and Nnamdi had been in a relationship for 5 long years. In their town, many people already saw them as husband and wife, even though no marriage had taken place yet. They attended ceremonies together, visited each other's families, and shared many memories. To outsiders, they looked like the perfect couple. Ugochi was known for her beauty and intelligence. She was well-schooled, confident, and carried herself with pride. Nnamdi, on the other hand, was a hard-working engineer who was doing very well in his career. He had a stable income, big dreams, and a clear vision for his future. At the beginning, their love was sweet and full of excitement. They talked for hours, laughed easily, and supported each other through small challenges. Friends admired them and often said their wedding was only a matter of time. Nnamdi truly loved Ugochi and once believed she was the woman he would spend the rest of his life with. He imagined building a peaceful home with her, raising children together, and growing old side by side. But as time went on, the difference between Ugochi and Nnamdi became more obvious. Nnamdi was a man who believed in planning ahead. He worked long hours and saved his money carefully. His dream was simple but important to him. He wanted a peaceful home, a supportive wife, and children he could proudly care for. He often spoke about buying land, starting a side business, and building a house before turning 40. To him, love was not only about romance, it was about partnership, responsibility, and shared goals. Ugochi, however, did not see life the same way. She enjoyed comfort and attention. She loved looking good and being admired. Whenever Nnamdi tried to discuss future plans, she would quickly change the topic to the latest fashion trends, new hairstyles, or the expensive items she wished he would buy for her. She believed that since Nnamdi was doing well financially, he should spoil her without question. Hard work and long-term planning did not interest her as much as enjoying the present moment. At first, Nnamdi tried to be patient. He bought gifts, paid bills, and ignored the signs that worried him. But deep inside, he felt uneasy. He began to notice that Ugochi rarely supported his ideas or encouraged his ambitions. Instead, she often complained when he was busy or tired from work. He started asking himself silent questions late at night. Can this woman truly stand beside me when life becomes difficult? Will she help me build or only expect me to provide? These thoughts disturbed him because he still cared for her. Yet the more he observed, the clearer the truth became. Their dreams were not moving in the same direction. What Nnamdi desired was a partner to grow with, while Ugochi seemed more focused on comfort and luxury. Slowly, love was no longer enough to hide the widening gap between them. The thoughts in Nnamdi's mind refused to go away. For many weeks he struggled with his feelings. He still cared about Ugochi, but he could not ignore the doubts growing inside him. Each time they met, he observed her more carefully. He noticed how easily she dismissed serious conversations and how quickly she became upset when he refused to buy expensive things. The future he once imagined with her no longer felt peaceful. Instead, it felt heavy and uncertain. Namdi was not a man who liked making rushed decisions. He believed 5 years was too long to waste on confusion. He spoke to a close friend and even prayed about it, hoping his heart would find clarity. But the more he thought about marriage, the more he realized that love alone could not sustain a home. Respect, support, and shared values mattered just as much. Deep down, he knew the truth he had been avoiding. One quiet evening, he invited Ugochi over to talk. His voice was calm, but his heart was racing. Ugochi arrived smiling, expecting a normal visit. She had no idea that this conversation would change everything. Namdi sat across from her and chose his words carefully. He did not want to insult her or start a fight. He simply wanted honesty. "Our relationship cannot lead to marriage," he finally said. "I need a partner who shares my goals and understands the life I want to build." For a moment, the room was silent. Ugochi blinked in disbelief, waiting for him to laugh and say he was joking. But his serious expression told her this was real. Her smile faded. Shock quickly turned to fear. 5 years of memories flashed through her mind like lightning. She felt as if the ground beneath her feet had suddenly disappeared. That night, Ugochi could not sleep. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Namdi's words again and again in her mind. "Our relationship cannot lead to marriage." The sentence echoed like a drumbeat in her head. 5 years of love, time, and hope suddenly felt wasted. She thought about the weddings they had attended together, the promises he once made, and the future she had already imagined. The fear of losing him completely wrapped around her like a tight rope. The next morning, she began to act. She called Namdi many times, but he did not answer. She sent long messages apologizing and promising to change. She told him she would become more supportive, more serious, and more understanding. Hours passed without a reply. The silence hurt more than harsh words would have. It made her feel invisible and rejected. Days went by, and Ugochi's calmness slowly turned into panic. Friends tried to comfort her, telling her that another man would come. But she did not want another man. She wanted Namdi. Her pride, her emotions, and her fear of starting over pushed her into deep desperation. She began to believe that ordinary efforts would no longer work. Love, apologies, and promises had failed. One evening, while sitting alone, a dark idea slipped into her thoughts. She remembered stories she once heard about charms that could bind a man's heart. Stories she had laughed at before now sounded tempting. At first, she shook her head and tried to ignore it. But the more she imagined Namdi marrying another woman, the stronger the thought became. Desperation clouded her judgment. What once seemed foolish now looked like a solution. And without fully thinking about the consequences, Ugochi decided she would do whatever it took to make Namdi hers again, even if it meant walking into darkness. At the far end of the village, beyond the last row of houses, stood a narrow path surrounded by tall trees. The path led to a small, lonely shrine that many people avoided. Children were warned never to go near it, and adults only visited when they felt they had no other choice. It belonged to Etitiko, an old native doctor known for powerful charms and strange rituals. Some said he solved impossible problems. Others said he created new ones. Ugochi had heard of him many times, but never imagined she would one day walk that path herself. Yet desperation pushed her forward. Her heart beat fast as she stepped over dry leaves and broken branches. The air felt heavy and quiet, as if the forest was watching her. When she finally reached the shrine, she hesitated for a moment, but the fear of losing Namdi completely gave her courage. Inside the shrine, the smell of herbs and smoke filled the air. Clay pots, animal skins, and carved wooden figures were arranged around the small room. Ititiko sat on a low stool, his gray beard resting on his chest. His eyes were sharp despite his age. The moment he saw Ugochi, he paused. Her beauty caught his attention immediately. It was rare for a young, attractive woman to enter his shrine alone. Ugochi explained her mission without wasting time. She wanted a charm that would force a man to marry her. As she spoke, Ititiko listened carefully, nodding slowly. But behind his calm expression, another thought was forming. He had spent many years alone. Women feared his profession and avoided him. Now, standing before him, was the kind of wife he had always desired. By the time Ugochi finished talking, Ititiko had already made a secret decision in his heart, one that would change her life forever. After listening to Ugochi carefully, Ititiko stood up slowly and moved toward a corner of the shrine. He began to gather different herbs, roots, and small bottles filled with dark liquids. His movements were calm and confident, like a man who had done the same ritual many times before. Ugochi watched with hope rising inside her. She believed she was finally close to getting what she wanted. Ititiko mixed the ingredients inside a small clay pot, whispering words Ugochi could not understand. Thin smoke rose into the air and the smell became stronger. When he finished, he poured the mixture into a tiny bottle and handed it to her. His eyes rested on her face longer than necessary, but Ugochi was too focused on her mission to notice the hidden meaning behind his gaze. "This will bind his heart," Ititiko said quietly. "But you must follow my instructions carefully." He told her she must not drink it in the shrine. Instead, she should take it home and drink it alone before going to visit Namdi the next day. He warned her not to share it with anyone and not to skip any step. Ugochi nodded quickly, eager for the charm to work. She paid him generously, thanked him, and even promised to return with a bigger offering once Namdi agreed to marry her. What she did not know was that the concoction was never prepared for Namdi. Ititiko had silently redirected the charm. The mixture was designed to turn her heart toward him instead. As Ugochi stepped out of the shrine clutching the small bottle, relief filled her chest. She felt certain she had secured her future. Behind her, Ititiko smiled to himself. In his mind, he had already thanked his chi for finally sending him the wife he had waited for all his life. The next morning, Ugochi followed Ititiko's instructions carefully. She locked herself inside her room, opened the tiny bottle, and drank the dark mixture. The taste was bitter, and it burned slightly as it went down her throat. For a moment, nothing happened. She stood there waiting, expecting to feel a sudden wave of power or confidence. Instead, there was only silence. She convinced herself that the charm was working quietly and prepared to visit Namdi. When she arrived at Namdi's house later that day, she expected a miracle. She imagined him smiling warmly, apologizing and asking her to marry him immediately. But the moment he opened the door and saw her, his face hardened. His expression was cold, almost irritated. He spoke sharply, asking why she was there again after he had made himself clear. Ugochi felt confused. She tried to talk sweetly, but Namdi grew more impatient. He complained that she was disturbing his peace and wasting his time. The more she spoke, the more distant he became. Within minutes, he told her firmly not to return. His words stung like sharp needles. This was the complete opposite of what she expected. As she walked away, another strange feeling began to grow inside her. Her deep love for Namdi, the love she once thought could never fade, started weakening. Memories that once made her smile now felt dull and unimportant. She tried to force herself to feel the same affection, but it was slipping away like sand through her fingers. Fear slowly replaced her confidence. Something was wrong. The charm had clearly worked, but not in the way she wanted. Instead of drawing Namdi closer, it pushed him further away. And even more frightening, her own heart was beginning to change in ways she could not understand. Confusion filled Ugochi's mind as she hurried back toward the shrine the following day. Her steps were faster than before, almost desperate. She kept asking herself the same question. What went wrong? The charm was supposed to make Namdi love her more, not push him away. Even worse, the strong feelings she once had for him were fading, and she could not explain why. Fear mixed with anger as she walked through the lonely path again. But the moment Ugochi stepped close to Etitiko's shrine, something strange happened. The same forest that once felt dark and frightening now seemed peaceful and welcoming. The air smelled sweet, like fresh flowers after rain. The silence no longer scared her. Instead, it calmed her. She slowed her steps without realizing it, as if an invisible hand was guiding her gently forward. When she entered the shrine and saw Etitiko, her heart skipped a beat. A warm feeling spread through her chest. The irritation and frustration she had carried on the journey suddenly disappeared. Instead of greeting him formally, she moved closer and embraced him tightly, surprising even herself. She stayed in his arms longer than necessary, feeling safe and comforted, almost like she had returned home after a long journey. For a moment, she completely forgot why she came. The complaint about the failed charm vanished from her thoughts. All she could notice was Etitiko's smile and the strange happiness growing inside her. Etitiko did not look surprised. He gently returned the embrace, his eyes shining with quiet victory. Without speaking many words, the truth had already revealed itself. The charm had not failed. It had simply chosen a different target. And in that silent embrace, Etitiko knew he had finally found the wife destiny had denied him for years. Not long after that visit, Ugochi made a decision that shocked everyone who knew her. The feelings growing inside her for Etitiko became stronger each day. She thought about him constantly. His voice comforted her, his presence made her feel calm, and the shrine that once frightened her now felt like a place of peace. Without realizing it, her mind had fully shifted. The memories of Namdi were now faint shadows in her heart. One afternoon, she announced to her family that she wanted to introduce the man she intended to marry. Her parents were surprised but also curious. They expected a young professional, or at least someone close to her age. When Ugochi arrived with Etitiko, silence filled the room. Her mother's smile disappeared instantly. Her father's eyes widened in disbelief. Her siblings exchanged confused glances. Etitiko greeted them politely, but his appearance and reputation were already known. The room felt tense. After he left, her family begged her to reconsider. They reminded her of her education, her beauty, and the many opportunities she still had ahead of her. They warned her about the dangers of charms and manipulation. Her mother even wept, fearing her daughter was under a strong spiritual influence. But Ugochi refused to listen. She defended Etitiko passionately, saying he was kind, wise, and misunderstood. She insisted she loved him and accused her family of judging him unfairly. No amount of advice or pleading could change her mind. The more they tried to stop her, the more determined she became. Finally, she packed her belongings and left with Etitiko despite their protests. Her family watched helplessly as she walked away, unable to recognize the daughter they once knew. It was as if an invisible force had closed her ears to reason and sealed her heart to their love. Years passed, and life quietly moved on. Namdi eventually met another woman named Ifunanya. She was calm, hard-working, and shared his dreams. Their conversations flowed easily. She listened when he spoke about plans and stood beside him when challenges came. With her, Namdi felt peace instead of pressure. In time, they married in a joyful ceremony filled with laughter and blessings. The home Namdi once imagined finally became real. Children soon filled their house with noise and happiness, and he often thanked God for the partner he had patiently waited for. Ugochi's life, however, followed a different path. She lived with Etitiko in the quiet shrine far from the village center. She bore him children and fulfilled the role of a wife, but something inside her was never fully alive. At first, she felt warmth and comfort, but as the years went by, that feeling slowly faded. The shrine that once looked beautiful began to feel dark again. The sweet air turned heavy. The smiles turned into long silences. Sometimes in the middle of the night, Ugochi would wake suddenly, her heart racing. She would sit outside and stare into the darkness, unable to explain the emptiness creeping into her chest. Memories she thought were gone would flash before her eyes. Namdi's laughter, his gentle plans for the future, the life she once almost had. Then the memories would disappear like smoke, leaving her confused and restless. She never fully understood that the charm she used did not just change her love, it changed her destiny. In the village, elders later told her story in hushed tones to young lovers, not as gossip, but as warning. Love forced by fear becomes a cage, and the trap you dig for another may one day become your own home. Desperation can make a person choose shortcuts that later become lifelong regrets. Love cannot be forced, tied, or manipulated without a price. When you try to control someone else's heart, instead of working on your own character, you may end up trapping yourself in the very situation you were trying to avoid. True relationships grow from patience, respect, and personal growth, not fear or pressure. If you were in Ugochi's place, would you have chosen self-improvement or a dangerous shortcut?
If this story made you think, share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share Tales at Dusk with someone who loves powerful stories and meaningful lessons.